My name's Vicky Hicks. As Michael said, I lead the digital voice program on behalf of BT Group in terms of raising as much awareness as we can. And we've partnered with Carers UK because, there are around 2 million vulnerable people across the UK that still heavily depend on their landline. And it's really important that we get factual and reassuring information out there about what the digital switchover means for everybody that uses a landline, but particularly those that rely more heavily. So I'm going to share some slides. Okay, so what's actually happening here? This is an industry-wide change, so it impacts all communications providers. It's not just a BT thing, it's not BT led, it's the whole telecoms industry. And effectively, the copper landline or the public switch telephone network, PSTN, as you might have heard it be called, is decades old. It's really, really old and it's no longer fit for purpose. In the year of 2024, there was a 45% increase in the number of faults on the analog copper home phone service. It's not keeping up with demand anymore, and we desperately need to do something in order to keep people connected to their home phone. Really important, the home phone isn't going anywhere. The landline's not going anywhere. It's just the technology that underpins how telephone calls are made that's changing. And regardless of who provides your home phone service at the moment, everybody's working to the date of January 2027 to safely migrate their customers to a digital home phone. So I've talked a little bit already about why that's happening. The current network is really unreliable now, and it's also incredibly energy hungry. So lots of you will hopefully be familiar with the telephone exchange. There's around 10,000 of them across the UK, and they are very energy hungry. Interesting fact for you, actually, they make up 1% of the UK's energy consumption. And if we can move people off of this really unreliable copper network that feeds our landlines, then we're able to also, whilst offering our customers a better service, do some really good things for the planet as well. And there's some benefits that I'll talk through about moving to digital voice as well. So the good news is, as I said, the landline's not going anywhere. It is purely the technology that underpins how the telephone call is made that's changing. And for the vast majority of people, it's a really, really simple upgrade that needs to happen. All that needs to happen is the current telephone that people are using that's plugged into that master socket on the wall. You unplug it from there and you plug it into the back of your broadband hub or router, as you can see there in step 2. And then you carry on using the same phone you always have. In the same way that you always have. And for the majority of customers, it's as simple as that. There are a couple of edge cases where it's different, and I will talk through those. But for the majority of our sort of 7 million customers that still use a landline, it's as simple as that. So if there's 3 things you take away from today's call, these would be the 3 things, and I'd honestly ask you to almost jot them down and share them with everyone you meet, because there is so much infactual and scaremongering information out there, particularly if you're a Daily Mail reader. And these are the things that I think put a lot of people's mind at rest. So this won't cost anyone a penny. There is no cost associated with moving to a digital landline. And if anybody is approached, asked for money, it's a scam. So we need people to be really vigilant of that. Regardless of who your provider is, there's no cost incurred by moving to a digital landline. This is a free upgrade. People will keep the same telephone number they've always used. So there's no need to get a new number. Lots of people um, have learnt that number and had it for many, many years, decades, some people. So there's no need to get a new telephone number with this. And over 99% of telephones are compatible with digital voice. So as long as the telephone plugs into that master socket in the wall today and has a dial tone when you lift the receiver, then it's compatible with digital voice and you don't need to get a new telephone. But this isn't a like for like service. So we're not just giving you something that is exactly the same as it is today. We're also able, via using a digital landline, to give lots of new enhanced services. So we're actually able to introduce enhanced scam protect features, which will help protect our customers from fraud. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're able to get back to that crystal clear call quality that people have come to expect from their home phone that frankly we're just not delivering at the moment because the network's so old. If it's too cold, the copper can't cope. If it's too hot, the copper can't cope. So we need to get away from that technology. And we're able to introduce some features like three-way calling. So my grandmother can talk to her 2 daughters at the same time. So for her, that's quite life-changing on her landline. So this slide here just kind of shows you that you don't need new equipment. Whether you've got a corded telephone or a cordless, BT branded or not, it will still work with digital voice. If you wanted to use the digital switch over as an opportunity to upgrade your handsets, then you absolutely can. There obviously is a cost associated with that, and it's not necessary. But if you'd like to use it as an opportunity to do that, then there are a whole suite of digital home phones available to purchase from BT, which are in the bottom right picture there. And on the right-hand side of this slide, we introduce something called the digital voice adapter. So I mentioned the step 1, 2, 3, unplug your phone from the wall, pop it into the back of your broadband hub or router. Now, for some, their sort of master phone and their broadband hub or router might not be in the same place in the house. So where that's the case, you would plug your telephone into one of these adapters instead. It goes into the top of that device there that you can see. You would plug that into any electric socket around the house, wherever you want that telephone to be. And then there's a button on the side, and you press that button on the side. You press the same button on the side of your broadband hub or router, and it pairs the two devices wirelessly so that you can have your phone anywhere around the house that you like. It also enables you to have multiple phones. So if you've got a set of cordless telephones, they'll carry on working as they do today, wirelessly around the home. But if you've got a number of corded telephones, then you'll need some adapters to keep each corded phone connected. One can go in the back of the hub, and then if you've got additional, so my grandparents have one in the living room and they have one by the side of the bed. So they would need a digital voice adapter to keep that second phone in their bedroom working. And those digital voice adapters are free for customers that need them. So I talked a little bit about that enhanced scam protection. So because we're using digital technology now to make phone calls, basically telephone calls will be made over the internet. So if you've heard of voice over IP or VoIP, that is essentially what digital voice is going forward. And we're able to introduce artificial intelligence along that digital landline that enables us to detect and block spam and fraud calls, while so that you can just receive the calls that you actually want to from your loved ones and doctors and things like that. So we're currently blocking over 20,000 scam calls a day, protecting our customers from those scams. And then we sort of present customers with this scam warning message here for a further 160,000 spam calls every day, where the customer can then decide for themselves, okay, this could be a dodgy call. Do I want to accept it or not? Maybe I accept it and I just go in a little bit more vigilant than I would have before. So we're getting lots of brilliant feedback from this, and it's a great way of keeping those vulnerable customers protected from, some not very nice people in the world. So the one drawback of moving to a digital landline is that at the moment the copper landline carries power down the line. So in the event of a power cut, your home phone continues to work. When we move to a digital landline, which requires the internet in order to connect those phone calls, it won't work in a power cut. So we've got a number of options that enable us to keep every customer that needs to stay connected in the event of a power cut, and I'll show you what those are now. So on the left-hand side there, we have a hybrid telephone. That operates and looks like a standard landline telephone day in, day out. You could use that every day the way you use your current telephone. In the event of a power cut, it has a built-in battery and a built-in SIM card, and it seamlessly switches over to the mobile network and essentially becomes a mobile phone. You've got the antenna there that you can see in the picture picking up the mobile signal, and that enables you to continue to make calls in the event of a power cut. An actual mobile phone will always be the best sort of resilient solution, but we know many of our customers still don't have a mobile phone, and so this is the next best thing. If you live in an area with really poor or no mobile coverage at all, then that's obviously not going to be that helpful for you. And so, in that instance, you'll be offered a battery backup unit, which are these images here on the right hand side. The black one is slightly older, and the white one is one that is coming to market really soon. And they're essentially mini generators. So they just power your broadband hub and router in the event of a power cut so that your internet stays up, and therefore so does your ability to make a phone call in the event of a power outage. And they'll keep you connected. The smaller white one, the one that we're bringing to market really soon, is really good in prolonged power cuts. So for those perhaps living a little bit more rurally, perhaps they were impacted by the most recent storm and were without power for a few days, this enables us to keep them connected during those prolonged power cuts. And I'm going to come on to a slide in a minute that talks about, who are the most vulnerable customers through this sort of once in a generation change. And any customer that is considered vulnerable will receive these items for free. So they'll get offered either a hybrid telephone or a battery backup unit for free in order to keep them connected in the event of a power cut. They'll also be offered an engineer assisted visit. So an engineer will come to their home and they'll actually make the switch to digital voice for them, even if it's as simple as unplugging the phone from the wall and popping it into the back of their broadband hub or into a digital voice adapter. One of our engineers will actually come and do that for customers that would like us to do that, test it works before they leave, and then some added reassurance for those customers. Here, just want to point out that, under the BT Group umbrella, we have EE and we have Openreach, and we're building hundreds of new 4G sites in rural areas across the UK in the last 12 months, and we'll build hundreds more in the 12 months ahead. So we really are working very hard to ensure our rural customers are connected. And Openreach are delivering ultra-fast full fibre broadband, which many of you might have already. As of January, actually, we passed 50% of all UK homes and businesses now have access to that fibre. Sadly, not me yet in Essex, but I'm hoping it won't be long. So I've talked about vulnerable customers, and this slide helps articulate that. It's a word not everybody likes to use. I appreciate that. But for the sake of this program, how we talk about the customers that need the most support through this once in a generation change, we do use the term vulnerable. So there are around 2 million customers in the UK that are very dependent on their home phone line and that couldn't do without it. And they therefore might feel even more anxious about making the switch. So it's really important that everyone knows no one's going to be left disconnected as a result of this. Everybody will continue to have their home phone. So those kind of 5 categories of customers that will get that additional support from us are those that have no mobile signal at all where they live. It's those customers that might have additional physical or mental needs. That includes cognitive things like dementia, for instance, or Alzheimer's. It's customers with healthcare pendants or alarms, so those telecare devices they wear around their neck or sometimes on their wrists and press the button for help. So anybody that's got one of those is considered vulnerable. That's customers over the age of 75. And we also have some customers that don't have any access to broadband or a mobile phone. They are what we call landline only, and I will come to them in a second. So again, any customer that falls into any one of these categories will receive those Power Resilient kit for free and the engineer visit to set this all up for them. So landline only customers then, those are the customers that don't have broadband. That could be because they still can't get broadband where they live, in very, very remote parts of the UK. Or it could be that they don't really have a need for broadband in their lives. My grandparents, I can't get them to use broadband, nor do they really want it. It's just very overwhelming for them. So we'll be moving those customers to what we call the dedicated landline service. And that allows our customers to continue using their landline in exactly the same way they do today. So we're making that service available from this year. We're starting to migrate customers to that in the spring. And it is a temporary solution. So it sees us through to about 2030. And we'll need to assess as an industry at that point how many customers still heavily rely on their landline because they have no other form of communication when we get to 2030. But all this means for these customers is their landline will work in a very similar way to the current analog technology, and there's no new equipment that needs installing, there's no engineer visits to the home, the customer doesn't need to take any action whatsoever. We'll actually make the change to make this a partially digital landline in their local telephone exchange. And on the day that that change happens, we'll obviously write to the customer in advance and let them know what day that's happening. And on the day that that change occurs, there'll be an outage of up to 1 hour of their landline where they won't be able to make calls or receive them. So for anyone that's particularly vulnerable and doesn't have a mobile phone, the letter will suggest that they either borrow one for the day or perhaps they have a loved one with them throughout that day so that they can make a call in an emergency if they need to. So how's the switchover happening? Just a few things I want to touch on here, just so you can see how closely we're working with the government on this. So the government put in a telecare charter of commitments in December 2023. Had to really think about that then. And that offers communications providers with really specific guidance on how we should all be protecting those that use telecare, those pendants, because they are, the most reliant on the landline because many of those pendants actually work using the landline technology. We then set up the Telecare Action Board, which is attended by central government, local government, the telecare and the telecoms industries, all working together to make sure that response to the Charter is consistent across all organisations. And then we have a readiness checklist that was put in by the Secretary of State in November 2024. And that's a set of conditions that all providers of home phones must meet before they're actually allowed to start migrating customers. So we meet all items on that checklist, and we began migrating customers again in January 2025, so just last month. We've been working with these charities for about 2 years now on what we call the Digital Voice Advisory Group, which is a meeting that I chair once every other month. And the idea of working with these charities is they know better than we do as to how to reach and support vulnerable customers. So they've done things, everything from review the communications that we send to make sure they think they make sense, through to what does our order journey look like, how might customers react to the pieces of equipment that we're sending, and to actually raising awareness on our behalf as well. So working really close with these organisations to make sure we get this right. And just to talk about those with telecare again, because it is so important, we're going to be introducing a new process with Openreach engineers very shortly, who, when we go and make that change to their landline, they will also reconnect the telecare device and test that it leaves, all free of charge before they leave the property. If it doesn't work, then the engineer will switch the customer back to their analogue landline, and we'll work with the local authority to figure out what we do with that telecare device and how we keep that person protected. We are heavily reliant on local authorities telling us who telecare users are, and we're doing that via some data sharing processes and policies that we have in place. But I'd also say, if you or anyone that you know uses a telecare device, it's really important that they let their telephone provider know that they have one, so we can make sure all this additional support's in place for them. So when are we moving customers is normally the biggest question people have. So throughout last year, we were moving customers that hadn't used their landline. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But there were hundreds of thousands of customers who weren't using their landline but still wanted to keep one. So we focused on them last year. From January, we're now migrating customers that do use their landline but that are not vulnerable. And that's across the UK. So it doesn't matter where in the UK you live, we're contacting you right now to move your home phone over. And then from spring, so slightly later this year, we'll be focusing on our vulnerable customers. So anyone that fits in any of those 5 categories I spoke to you about. And we're going to do that regionally. So if we look at those regions, you can see here wherever you live and where you're going to fall into that. So from the spring, we're going to be focusing in the east of England, Northern Ireland, Wales, Yorkshire and Humber. So we'll be contacting all of our customers in those regions and countries to move them to a digital landline from the spring. Doesn't mean they'll all all be moved in the spring, but we'll be contacting them from the spring. And then from the summer, we'll move to the East Midlands, London, the northeast of England and Scotland. And then as we head into the autumn, we'll focus on the northwest, southeast, southwest of England and the West Midlands. And the idea of trying to do this kind of regionally is so that communities can all go through this together, they can support one another, we can be far more targeted with the awareness raising and communications that we send, so that hopefully there's lots of support out there for everybody. In terms of what the customer journey looks like, they'll receive a letter from us on day one that tells them, it's now your turn to move to digital voice. There's numerous touch points there. You can see various different bits of communications that we send our customers, and it's a 4 weeks notice. So on day 35 is when we actually switch them over to digital voice. So just a quick one on how we're kind of raising awareness about this. So we've run about 600 events. Everywhere you can see a pin on that map is where we had an event last year. We've spoken to about 35,000 customers on a face-to-face basis. We've done lots of press and radio adverts to try and get awareness up. And we're not stopping there. So this year we're going to do a further 800 events across the UK, really focusing on more rural areas this time. We're going to have more of a social media presence for those loved ones that support people, vulnerable people through this. We are going to be doing some national awareness raising campaigns in conjunction with the government. So we're going to have a co-branded campaign that will hit televisions in May to make sure people know what this is, and specifically for those telecare users to let us know they have telecare. And we're working in partnerships with as many charities and local organisations as we can, just like Carers UK, to get as much information out about the digital switchover as possible, because it really isn't anything to be feared, but there is so much inaccurate information out there. I can completely understand why people are worried. We're also trying to get into sort of publications that we think our vulnerable customers might read, putting advertorials and information in those. We're going to be running a social media campaign at the end of this month that again is targeting the adult children and grandchildren of some of our most vulnerable customers, so that perhaps over Sunday dinner they can support their grandparents and great grandparents through this and have a little chat around the dinner table. And here's some pictures of some of the events that we run so you can sort of see the scale and the breadth of it. So in terms of how you can help us, it's really important that people have the accurate information. So we're obviously working with Carers UK to get that out, but indeed yourselves, if you wanted to go on the BT website, there is lots of information there and factual things. Um, and if you know anyone or indeed yourself feel you would need additional support with this, then if you're a BT customer, all you need to do is phone 150 from your landline and let us know that you need additional support, and we'll make sure you get all of that support for free.